Our story today is about one of the smartest and greatest thefts in the history of Germany. The intriguing part of this theft is that it was not carried out by Europeans or Germans, but by a brilliant Arab gang. Due to the extreme cleverness of this operation, the German government tried to keep the details of the incident under wraps because what happened put the German authorities in a very embarrassing position in front of the world. The theft revealed the cunning of the thieves, which surpassed the police's expertise in handling major crimes, making it one of the most daring and thrilling operations in German history. An armed gang stormed a bank and took customers and employees hostage. The police quickly surrounded the entire area and began lengthy negotiations with the gang members. After hours of discussions, the police decided to storm the bank to end the crisis. But upon entering, a shocking surprise awaited them, as the criminals had disappeared without leaving any trace or evidence behind. Despite the police surrounding the bank from all sides, the question arose: where did the thieves go? And how did they manage to escape? The events of our true story begin in the heart of the German capital, Berlin, on the 27th of June, 1995. At 10 o'clock in the morning, when the police and special forces moved towards one of the banks in response to a robbery alarm, they surrounded the bank completely upon arrival. They discovered that 16 employees and customers were held hostage inside the bank by 3 armed men wearing masks that concealed their faces, and they were armed with machine guns, pistols, and hand grenades. And when they saw the danger of the weapons the thieves were carrying, they realized the difficulty of the mission, so they requested assistance from the military tactical forces to handle the situation. I immediately went to the bank, and snipers quickly spread over the rooftops of the buildings surrounding the bank until it was surrounded from all sides in just a few minutes. At the same time, the media arrived at the scene and began covering the events, spreading the news throughout the country. Afterwards, they closed off the entire area and prevented civilians or any unauthorized person from entering. Then, the police and authorities established a direct line of communication with the gang inside the bank to learn their demands. After 30 minutes of negotiations, one of the gunmen released a hostage carrying a message in his hand. The gunmen say in this message that they are demanding a ransom of $12 million. The message also includes a warning that any attempt by the police to storm the bank will directly lead to shooting the hostages and then exchanging fire with the police. As time passed, the police tried to reopen negotiations with the gang, demanding the release of some hostages before giving them the money. However, the gunmen refused the police's demands and remained firm in their decision. When the police tried to communicate with them again, the response from the gang was shocking, as they cut off all lines of communication with the police and refused to talk or negotiate with them for 5 hours. During this period, the police and authorities waited anxiously because they did not know what was happening inside the bank and could not do anything. Finally, at 6 o'clock in the evening, the silence was broken. A young mother, one of the hostages, was forced to call a local radio station in Berlin with a trembling and panic-filled voice. She began pleading for help and rescue for herself and the other hostages. This call was a very clever move by the gang, as people became more sympathetic to the hostages and more worried about their fate, especially when they heard the voice of this mother pleading for her life. This put the police and authorities under great pressure to provide the money and deliver it to the gang as quickly as possible. However, despite the increasing pressure and tension on the police, they remained firm in their stance and refused to comply with the gunmen's demands, continuing to surround the bank without providing any official response. On the other hand, the gang also held its position and refused to communicate directly with the police. After an hour passed, the police began to raise troubling questions. Why does this gang refuse to speak directly with them and allow the hostages to contact the radio and ask for help from people? This seemed mysterious to them. In any case, the police did not take any actual steps and remained content with monitoring and waiting. But moments later, the gang announced that their patience had run out and started firing into the sky. When the police heard the sound of gunfire coming from inside the bank, a state of panic and tension spread among the security forces. None of them knew exactly what was happening, but they believed that the gunmen had started carrying out their threats or had shot one of the hostages. Immediately, the security leaders gathered and began discussing all possible options to deal with the situation, with one of them suggesting bringing an armored truck and storming the bank by force. But before they could execute any plan, something strange happened that turned the tables. Suddenly, a masked gunman came out of the bank holding a hostage and headed directly in front of the police and the media.
He shouted angrily, saying that we will start shooting all the hostages one by one if you do not meet our demands immediately. This open threat doubled the pressure on the police and authorities, who found themselves in a very difficult position between rescuing the hostages and preventing the situation from escalating further.
After intense discussions between the police and authorities, they decided to take a strategic step to resolve the crisis by bringing 1/3 of the ransom amount requested by the gunmen, which is $4 million, as a gesture to show the gunmen their goodwill to resolve this crisis peacefully. And at 7:30 in the evening, this money was delivered to the gang by a police officer wearing only his underwear to assure the gunman that he was unarmed. After receiving the money again, the gunmen cut off all means of communication, leaving the police in a state of anticipation and waiting for 2.5 hours without any updates or news. They did not know what the gunmen were doing inside the bank. The situation remained the same until the police phone rang again. The callers were the gang members calling from the bank's phone. This time, they asked the police to bring a bus for them in front of the bank with the remaining ransom amount inside it, in addition to bringing a helicopter and placing it in a neighborhood close to the bank. They also informed the police that they would leave the bank for the bus at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning. The police agreed to the gang's demands and prepared the bus with the required amount. At midnight, the bus was ready in front of the bank with all the arrangements. A helicopter was also ready, waiting for them at the location previously specified by the gunmen. When 2 o'clock in the morning arrived, the gunmen did not move as they had promised the police, which meant they were still inside the bank. Therefore, the police decided to wait and monitor in front of the bank for another hour and a half. At 3:30 in the morning, the police received a call from the bank. This time, the caller was not one of the gang members, but the call was from the bank manager himself, with a trembling voice. He informed the police that all the gunmen went down to the basement and did not reappear. Without hesitation, the police command gave an immediate order for the special forces to quickly storm the bank, and when they entered, they took control of the ground floor, where they found all the hostages safe, and none of them were harmed. They evacuated them from the bank. Then the special forces officers went down to the basement. After searching it carefully, they found no one there. They realized that the only place the gunmen might be hiding was the bank's vault. They went down to it and surrounded the vault door from the right and left. They opened it slightly and then threw a flashbang inside the vault. Then they stormed the place forcefully. And when they entered the vault, they were unexpectedly shocked as they found no one inside. They also discovered that more than 200 safety deposit boxes had been opened, and their contents, including money and valuable jewelry worth millions of dollars, had been stolen. The strange thing is that the gang completely disappeared from the bank without leaving any trace, even though the police had surrounded the place from all angles. The question arises again. Where did they disappear to? For many, this is considered the smartest bank robbery in history. The planner and mastermind of this operation was merely a technical assistant for X-rays in a hospital in Germany. He was fired due to some issues, which left him unemployed, and no one wanted to hire him again. Instead of surrendering to his reality, he decided to plan a massive robbery and execute it with the help of a group of his friends and acquaintances. So how did this simple man transform from a technician in a hospital to the mastermind of the largest bank heist in history? And how could he and his friends steal money and valuable jewelry worth more than $12 million and then suddenly disappear without leaving a trace? The hero of our story is a Syrian man named Khaled al-Barazi. He left his country for Germany in 1986 to improve his life circumstances. After a short time spent in the German capital Berlin, he got a job in a hospital as an X-ray technician assistant, but his expectations for a better life in Germany were not met, and his income was not sufficient for him during that period. This led Khaled to become involved in the world of crime, where he started by stealing medications and equipment from the hospital. Over time, he escalated his crimes to drug trafficking. But the police quickly arrested him, and he served a prison sentence for 2 years from 1991 to 1993. Inside the prison, Khaled met another person with the same ideas and ambitions named Jambri. A strong relationship quickly developed between them, and they became friends. Since then, the two began planning the biggest bank robbery in Germany's history. After their release from prison, he began searching for their suitable target in the streets of Berlin. Khaled had a brother named Tony who owned a car repair shop in an upscale neighborhood. Khaled began searching within the area where his brother's workshop was located. After a long search, they chose their target, which was a branch of the trade bank. To execute their plan, Khaled dressed elegantly and pretended to be a customer interested in the bank's services. He went to the bank and asked them about the methods they offer to protect valuable items inside the private vaults. An employee took him to the basement where the safety deposit boxes are kept, and as soon as he laid eyes on the hundreds of those boxes, Khaled's mouth watered when he realized that inside lay priceless treasures and wealth. After leaving the bank, Khaled decided to look for a third person to help them rob this bank, as he believes that carrying out such operations requires a multidisciplinary team. Therefore, Khaled suggested to his friend Ibrahim to join them and presented him with the idea. As soon as he heard that, Ibrahim got excited and quickly accepted the offer, and he started thinking with them about making a plan to rob this bank. Thanks to the city's public archive, they were able to find the architectural plans of the bank building. They discovered that the building was originally a clothing store before it became a bank. Because of these plans, Khaled knew that the floor in the basement was relatively weak, so they decided to dig a tunnel underground. It was easy to execute because the soil in Berlin is mostly composed of sand. The ground was not hard or rocky, making digging very easy. Khaled and Ibrahim realized that the real challenge was not in the digging itself, but in choosing the right place to start digging first, and then how to reach the bank's vault second. After that, they searched for the closest place to the bank where they could start digging, and they found an empty garage near the bank. This garage is about 200 meters away from the bank. Khaled did not hesitate to seize the opportunity. He contacted the garage owner and told him that he was a Greek merchant needing to rent the garage to store his goods. After brief negotiations, they reached an agreement on the rental price. After securing the garage to start digging, the next step was to find a team to carry out this operation with them. The first person they recruited was Khaled's brother, Tony, who owns a car workshop near the bank. As for Ibrahim, he took on the responsibility of gathering the rest of the gang members because he knows many people who might be willing to carry out such an operation. Ibrahim then recruited another person from the Arab community in Berlin, named Musa. He convinced him to join them. Thus, the team became 5 people: Khaled, his brother Tony Gambrium, Ibrahim, and his friend Musa. In June 1994, these 5 started working on digging the tunnel from the garage. The operation was complex and divided into 2 phases. The first was digging the sand and removing it from the tunnel. The second was reinforcing the tunnel to prevent its collapse, where they used more than 3 tons of wood and metal to create a strong support structure to maintain the tunnel's stability and prevent it from collapsing. In addition, they installed ventilation pipes and electrical wires to provide lighting inside the tunnel. They were always digging non-stop for 12 to 14 hours a day, with 2 or 3 of them taking turns each time. Khaled and his team named this project The Dream and continued working non-stop for 5 consecutive months, overcoming all difficulties to accomplish their plan. Despite all the efforts made during this period, they were only able to dig a third of the distance to the bank. To reach the bank quickly, Khaled proposed a very clever plan. Since they were digging directly towards the bank, they knew it would take them more time and double the effort. Instead, Khaled's plan was to dig towards the stormwater drainage pipe used during heavy rains and storms, as this pipe runs along the street and reaches a place very close to the bank. After months of continuous work, Khaled and his companions succeeded in reaching the drainage pipe, through which they passed until they reached the area near the bank. Then they began digging a new tunnel again, extending from the pipe to the bank's vault where the safes are located. However, this stage was more difficult than the previous tunnel, as they faced a major challenge because they needed to dispose of the soil resulting from the digging outside the tunnel, and the distance was too far to carry it back to the garage. Despite these obstacles, the team continued digging, but this time very slowly, and they continued the digging operations for a few more days. Then, one day, an unexpected event occurred. While working in the tunnel, Khaled saw workers in front of the bank, exactly above the same place where they were digging the tunnel. These workers were maintaining the cables directly above the tunnel. Khaled and his friends realized they had to act quickly, remove the supports from one part of the tunnel, and let it collapse, because the workers digging above during the excavation and maintenance would discover it, and thus their plan would fail. Due to this sudden development, they decided to temporarily stop digging and wait until the workers above the tunnel completed their work, which took a full 4 months. However, they were lucky because the workers never found the tunnel. After months of stopping, Khaled and his team returned to work and continued digging towards the bank's vault. Finally, after about a year of digging and hard work, they managed to reach the bank vault. Ibrahim suggested that they sneak into the vault through the tunnel at night during the weekend, to have enough time to steal everything and escape in the best condition. But they faced a new challenge. This bank was equipped with surveillance cameras and advanced alarm systems, which meant there was a high possibility of being caught during the operation. Therefore, they needed a new plan to distract the police from them. And here, Khaled had a crazy idea that no one expected and the police would never think of. And on the morning of the 27th of June, 1995, Khaled, along with his brother Tony and his friend Ibrahim, stormed the bank through the front door armed with heavy weapons, and upon entering the middle of the bank, they took everyone present as hostages. At first, the operation appeared to be just a traditional armed robbery, which made the police focus only on negotiating with them. During these negotiations, Khaled and Tony took responsibility for managing the hostages and negotiating with the police. Meanwhile, their friend Ibrahim went to the basement, entered the bank vault, and started drilling a small hole in the floor. Through this hole, the remaining two members of the team entered the underground tunnel using drilling machines and necessary equipment. Once they entered the bank vault, they began breaking and opening the locks of the safety deposit boxes, taking advantage of the chaos upstairs to complete their operation without drawing attention. When the police arrived at the scene, Khaled sent one of the hostages carrying a message specifying the ransom amount. After the first few hours, another hostage was released. Then contact with the police was cut off for 5 full hours. The main goal of these actions was not merely to signal good intentions to the police, but to confuse them and distract their attention to gain more time. Because during this period, the rest of the gang members in the basement were working non-stop to open as many safety deposit boxes as possible. And when they managed to break in, they found real treasures of jewelry and gold. Then they began packing the loot into bags. After that, they placed them on a special sled to transport them quickly through the tunnel leading to the garage. At the same time, Khaled continued to outsmart the police with his genius, resorting to a new clever trick by allowing one of the hostages to speak to the public through a radio station. This action increased a lot of pressure on the police and authorities, causing them to become confused again and hesitant to carry out any sudden intervention. Then Khaled added a new trick to pressure the authorities. He fired 2 shots at the ceiling, which suggested to the police that the situation had become more dangerous, giving his team more time for the theft and escape, as the police thought the gunman had started shooting at the hostages, significantly increasing the pressure on them. Fearing an escalation of events, they handed over 1/3 of the ransom demanded by the gang to calm the situation. The authorities handed over $4 million to Khaled and his gang while they were opening all the safety deposit boxes in the vault. After they finished collecting the loot, they requested the police to provide a bus and a helicopter as part of their escape plan. And that was the last contact between them and the police. After midnight, while everyone was unaware, the gang members quietly descended through the hole they had dug in the basement floor, then sneaked through the tunnel until they reached the garage. At the same time, the police were surrounding the bank from all angles, waiting for the gang to exit through the front door. However, Khaled and his companions succeeded in passing beneath their feet without being noticed. As soon as they reached the garage, they left immediately, carrying with them more than $12 million in cash and jewelry. After they completed the operation, the special forces quickly stormed the bank. It did not take long for the police to discover the tunnel through which the thieves escaped. And when they followed the path of this tunnel, it led them directly to the garage. On the other hand, the thieves had planned everything with great care, leaving no trace behind that night. The gang members returned to their homes quietly, as if nothing had happened. They sat in front of the television watching news reports about their crime, while Khaled was completely confident in the success of his plan and certain that they left no evidence behind. Therefore, he ordered everyone to stay in Berlin and continue their daily lives normally without arousing suspicion. However, the police were not ready to give up so easily, as they formed a special investigation team consisting of 60 investigators, all determined to solve the mystery of the theft. This team began investigating and analyzing every step of the operation, searching for any clue that might lead them to this gang. The first task was to carefully examine the bank, but they found nothing. No fingerprints or any DNA traces belonging to any of the gunmen. Afterwards, the investigators interrogated the hostages, hoping that one of them had noticed something useful. or information that could help them find the people who carried out this operation. The only information they obtained was that the gunmen might have been of Arab origin based on their accent while speaking. Immediately, the investigators went to the garage owner and interrogated him. He told them that he rented his garage to a Greek man who claimed to be a merchant, and that's all he knows about him. The investigators continued searching for any sign or evidence leading them to the thieves. Suddenly, luck was on their side when a construction worker working in a building near the garage told them he saw 3 men with Arab features throwing sand on the building where he was working. Therefore, the investigators went to the site and took a small sample of the sand to examine it in the lab. The tests showed that this sand was exactly identical to the sand inside the tunnel, which means that the 2 men who were throwing sand at the construction site are members of the gang. Based on the description provided by the construction worker, the police drew sketches of the suspects, which were quickly published in newspapers and broadcast on television stations in the hope that someone would recognize them. A few days later, the police received a call from an anonymous person saying that there is a man. He works in a car workshop near the bank. His facial features resemble one of the people drawn in the published pictures. This man was none other than Tony Al-Barzi, Khalid's brother. The police immediately headed to his workshop and began questioning him, asking some questions. But he repeatedly insisted that he knew nothing about the theft or anyone who might be involved in it. However, the investigators did not believe him, and their suspicions increased even more. During the interrogation, one of the officers noticed that Tony was drinking juice, so he waited until he finished and took the can without drawing his attention. The can was sent to the lab to verify his fingerprints. They also checked his name in their database. The results showed that Tony has a brother named Khaled Al-Barzi, who was imprisoned a few years ago on several criminal charges. From this moment, Khaled and Tony became the main suspects in the case, and the police directed their investigations entirely towards them. However, they did not have enough evidence to arrest them. Meanwhile, the authorities decided to conduct a thorough examination of the tunnel and requested assistance from the army to conduct a precise survey before dismantling it. They conducted a full scan of the tunnel using the latest technologies in an attempt to find any trace that could lead them directly to the perpetrators. However, despite all the efforts made by the police and the army, they failed. Then the army returned to the site again and began dismantling the tunnel. But this time, they used advanced infrared scanning techniques. Every piece of wood removed from the tunnel was examined carefully. And after thorough inspections, they finally found the first piece of evidence. They obtained a fingerprint imprinted on one of the wooden boards used to support the tunnel. This fingerprint was the only evidence the investigators obtained, but it was enough to link one of the gang members to the crime. This fingerprint belonged to its owner, Tony Al-Barzi. Following this discovery, the police immediately arrested Tony and took him to the interrogation room. The investigators continued questioning him for 7 continuous hours. During the investigation, Tony became very confused and extremely nervous. The investigators kept pressing him until he finally broke down and started confessing to the investigators, telling them everything. He revealed to them the full details of the operation and the names of all the gang members led by his brother Khaled, the mastermind of the operation. The police quickly moved to arrest the rest of the gang members and managed to capture Khaled and Jambri while they were fleeing outside Germany. As for the remaining 2 members of the gang, Ibrahim and Musa, they were tracked down and arrested as well. Faced with overwhelming evidence, they confessed to their crimes after being convicted of the charges against them. The trial continued for a few months. Afterwards, the court issued prison sentences ranging from 5 years to 10 years, except for Khaled, who was sentenced to 14 years in prison as the mastermind of the operation. Khaled also had a golden opportunity to escape immediately after carrying out the operation, but he delayed in Berlin, confident that the police would not find any evidence leading to him. His arrogance and overconfidence were the reasons for his downfall in the end. However, although the police arrested all the gang members, most of the stolen money remained a hidden mystery. The authorities managed to recover only 1/3 of the amount, while $8 million remained completely hidden, and no one knew where it went. However, Khaled was the only person who knew the location of the remaining money, but he refused to talk, despite several attempts by the police to persuade him. Afterward, the investigators offered him a reduced sentence in exchange for revealing the location of the money, but he decided to remain silent and not speak, because he was sure of only one thing. After his release from prison in the year 2010, the fortune would be waiting for him in a safe place. It's true that he received a prison sentence of 14 years, which is a long time, but in the end, when he gets out, he will achieve the dream of wealth that he has had since he came to Germany, and that dream will become a reality. And thus ended one of the boldest and smartest thefts in the history of Germany, yet its memory will remain etched in the records of major crimes that almost became perfect.
And you, dear viewer, share your opinion with us in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our channel to receive all the latest updates.